The notification popped up at 3:47 p.m. on a Tuesday, while I was debugging a machine learning pipeline that had been choking on data for 3 weeks straight. Your access to the development environment has been revoked. Please contact your supervisor for clarification. I blinked at the screen like it was written in ancient hieroglyphics because I was the one who built half the infrastructure. They were now apparently locking me out of my mouse hovered over the refresh button, hoping this was some cosmic glitch in the matrix. But the red error message just sat there, smug and final, like a digital eviction notice. I called Marcus, my team lead, who picked up on the fourth ring, sounding like he'd rather be getting a root canal. "Hey, what's this about my access being revoked?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady, even though my stomach was doing backflips. Marcus cleared his throat, the way people do when they're about to deliver news that'll ruin your week. "Look, we need to talk. Can you come to conference room C in 10 minutes? I hung up and sat there staring at my reflection in the black monitor screen. The same screen where I'd spent 18 months writing algorithms that could predict customer behavior with scary accuracy. The same desk where I'd pulled all-nighters fixing bugs that would have cost the company millions if they went live. The same chair where I'd celebrated when my recommendation engine increased user engagement by 47%, and now they were summoning me to conference room C like I was a misbehaving intern who got caught stealing Post-it notes. If you've ever been in that moment where you know your life is about to get flipped upside down, but you still have to walk through the motions, like everything's normal, hit that subscribe button, because what I'm about to tell you is going to make you question everything you think you know about job security and artificial intelligence. Conference room C smelled like burnt coffee and corporate desperation. Marcus was already there, fidgeting with a stack of papers, like they contained launch codes for nuclear missiles. Sitting next to him was Diana from HR, wearing that sympathetic smile that HR people practice in the mirror. The one that says, "I'm about to destroy your livelihood, but I want you to know I feel really bad about it." Diana slid a folder across the table and launched into what I can only describe as the most insulting speech I've ever heard. "We've made the difficult decision to restructure our AI development team," she said. "As part of our digital transformation initiative, we're implementing a new automated development platform that can handle the workload more efficiently and cost-effectively." I opened the folder. While she kept talking, severance package, 2 weeks pay, continuation of health insurance for 60 days, and a glowing letter of recommendation that made me sound like a saint who happened to write code. Marcus wouldn't look at me, just kept staring at his coffee like it held the secrets of the universe. "So you're firing me," I said, cutting through Diana's corporate poetry. She winced at the word firing. "We prefer to call it a workforce optimization, but essentially, yes, your position has been eliminated." Diana leaned forward with that practiced empathy that probably came from a weekend seminar on handling difficult conversations. "We want you to know this isn't about your performance. You've been an exceptional contributor, but the new AI system can generate and optimize code faster than any human developer. It's just the direction the industry is heading." I laughed once, short and bitter. "So you're replacing me with AI? That's rich, considering I wrote half the algorithms you're probably using to make this decision." Her smile flickered for just a second before snapping back into place. "We understand this is difficult, but we're confident you'll find new opportunities that leverage your unique human creativity and problem-solving skills." I wanted to throw something preferably heavy and expensive, but instead I signed the papers, smiled like a good little terminated employee, and walked out with my cardboard box of personal effects in a burning question echoing in my skull. If this AI was so revolutionary, if it could really replace a senior developer with 5 years of machine learning experience, then why did it feel like they were trying way too hard to convince me it wasn't personal? That night, I sat in my apartment with a bottle of wine that cost more than my daily Starbucks habit, staring at my personal laptop like it was a crystal ball that might reveal my future. I'd been careful over the years, backing up my work, keeping copies of my algorithms and frameworks for portfolio purposes, completely legal, completely ethical, just good practice for any developer who wanted to showcase their skills to future employers. I opened my external drive and started browsing through folders labeled with project names that suddenly felt like epitaphs. Customer behavior, prediction, engine, revenue, optimization, framework, dynamic pricing, algorithm, recommendation, system, neural network, each one representing months of my life, translated into lines of code that could think, learn, and make decisions that affected millions of users. I pulled up the recommendation engine, the crown jewel of my portfolio. 18 months of research development and optimization that had single-handedly revolutionized how the company understood user preferences. The algorithm was elegant, if I do say so myself, a hybrid approach that combined collaborative filtering with deep learning techniques to predict what users wanted before they even knew they wanted it. I'd trained it on massive datasets, spent weeks fine-tuning hyperparameters, and had even published a paper about the methodology that got cited in 3 industry journals. But here's the thing about being a good developer. You don't just write code. You document everything, every decision, every iteration, every failed experiment that led to the breakthrough. I had notebooks full of research data, validation, results, and performance metrics that told the complete story of how that algorithm came to life. And as I scrolled through my documentation, a thought began to crystallize, cold and sharp, like ice forming on a window. They said they were replacing me with AI, but what if that AI was built on my work? What if the revolutionary new system that made me obsolete was actually just my code, with a different label slapped on top? I spent the next 3 days doing what any self-respecting developer would do. I reverse-engineered the problem. Instead of trying to hack into their systems, which would be illegal and stupid, I did something much more elegant. I applied for beta access to their new AI development platform. They were marketing it as an innovative solution for businesses wanting to leverage artificial intelligence without hiring expensive developers. The irony was so thick, you could cut it with a debugger. I created a fake consulting company, complete with a professional website and glowing testimonials from fictional clients. Then, I submitted an application claiming I needed to evaluate their platform for a large enterprise client who was considering migrating their entire development workflow. The application was approved within 48 hours because, apparently, nothing says trustworthy like a website with stock photos and buzzword-heavy copy that mentioned digital transformation 17 times. Their demo environment was beautiful. I'll give them that. Sleek interface, intuitive workflow, and a promise that you could build complex AI applications without writing a single line of code. Just describe what you want in natural language, and their revolutionary algorithm would generate production-ready code automatically. I decided to test it with something simple, a basic recommendation system for an e-commerce platform. I typed in my requirements, similar products based on user behavior, collaborative filtering with machine learning, optimization, and hit generate. What came back made my blood run cold. It wasn't just similar to my algorithm. It was my algorithm, with variable names changed and comments stripped out. But the core logic, the mathematical formulations, the specific optimizations, I'd developed through months of trial and error. It was all there wrapped in automatically generated documentation that made it sound like some groundbreaking innovation. I ran it again with different parameters, requesting a customer segmentation system. This time, the output included functions I recognized, data, pre-processing methods I'd written, and even a specific bug fix I'd implemented to handle edge cases in sparse datasets. They hadn't just replaced me with AI. They'd replaced me with my own work, repackaged and sold back to the market as artificial intelligence, when what they'd really built was an elaborate plagiarism machine that could spit out variations of my code on demand. The next phase of my investigation required more finesse. I couldn't just download their entire code base without raising red flags, but I could probe the system methodically, like a detective gathering evidence for a case that would blow up in their faces. I started submitting increasingly specific requests, asking for implementations that required the exact techniques I'd pioneered. If their AI was truly original, it would approach these problems differently. Maybe use standard algorithms from textbooks, or implement solutions that had been published in research papers. But every single output bore my fingerprints, the way I structured neural networks, the specific regularization techniques I favored, even the variable naming conventions I developed over years of writing clean, maintainable code. I created a spreadsheet documenting each test request response in similarity to my original work. It read like a confession written in Python and JavaScript. They'd taken every major algorithm I'd contributed to the company, stripped away my authorship, and fed it into a system that could reproduce my work without giving me credit or compensation. The recommendation engine that had earned the company millions in additional revenue was now being licensed to other businesses as revolutionary AI technology developed by their crack team of anonymous artificial intelligence researchers. But I needed more than just suspicions and side-by-side code comparisons. I needed smoking gun evidence that would hold up under legal scrutiny, the kind of proof that would make their lawyers sweat through their expensive suits. That's when I remembered something that would become their downfall and my vindication. Every piece of code I'd ever written for the company contained a subtle signature, nothing obvious, no copyright notices or hidden messages, just a specific way I organized functions and handled error cases, a digital fingerprint that was as unique as my actual thumbprint. I'd developed this coding style over years of programming, influenced by my computer science education, specific frameworks I'd learned, and personal preferences that had become unconscious habits, the way I indented nested loops, how I named temporary variables, the order in which I imported libraries, even the specific comments I used to explain complex logic. It was all distinctly mine, like a literary style that English professors could identify across different works. But here's the brilliant part about having a consistent coding style. When someone takes your work and tries to disguise it, they can change variable names, update comments, and restructure the surface elements. But the underlying patterns, the DNA of your programming logic, that's much harder to eliminate without completely rewriting everything from scratch, and whoever had fed my code into their AI system clearly hadn't bothered with such thorough obfuscation. They'd assumed that cosmetic changes would be enough to hide the theft. I spent 2 weeks building a forensic analysis tool that could scan code bases and identify stylistic fingerprints with statistical precision. It analyzed everything from function, complexity patterns, to comment density, and even the specific mathematical approaches used to solve common problems. When I ran my tool against the output from their AI platform, the results were damning: 93% similarity to my coding patterns across every major function, not the kind of similarity you'd expect from coincidence or industry standard practices, but the kind that screams intentional copying with minimal effort to disguise the source. I had my smoking gun, but I needed to be strategic about how I used it. Going public immediately might feel satisfying, but it would also give them time to cover their tracks, update their system, and muddy the waters with counterclaims about independent development. Instead, I decided to build an airtight case that would destroy them in the court of public opinion and possibly an actual court. I reached out to Sarah Chen, a journalist who specialized in technology ethics and had written several exposés about AI companies making misleading claims about their innovations. I'd followed her work for years and knew she had both the technical background to understand the evidence and the investigative instincts to pursue the story aggressively. Our first meeting was at a coffee shop downtown, where I laid out my case with the methodical precision of a prosecutor presenting evidence to a grand jury. I showed her the side-by-side code comparisons, the statistical analysis of programming patterns, and the timeline that proved my algorithms had been developed months before their AI platform launched. Sarah's eyes lit up with the kind of intensity that investigative journalists get when they smell blood in the water. "This isn't just plagiarism," she said, scrolling through my documentation. "This is systematic intellectual property theft, disguised as innovation. And if they're doing this to you, they're probably doing it to other developers too." She was right. And over the next month of investigation, we uncovered a pattern of behavior that made my case look like just the tip of the iceberg. Sarah reached out to former employees through anonymous channels and discovered at least 6 other developers who'd been laid off under similar circumstances, all of them senior engineers who'd contributed significant algorithms to the company's AI initiatives, and all of them replaced by automated systems that bore suspicious similarities to their work. One former employee had developed a natural language processing framework that could analyze customer sentiment with remarkable accuracy after he was terminated. The company launched a sentiment analysis API that used identical pre-processing techniques and even the same statistical models he'd spent 2 years perfecting. Another had created a computer vision system for quality control in manufacturing. When she was laid off, citing budget constraints, the company immediately began licensing a visual inspection AI that implemented her exact approach to detecting defects in assembly line products. The pattern was clear and devastating. They weren't just replacing individual employees with AI, they were systematically harvesting the intellectual property of their entire development team, repackaging it as revolutionary artificial intelligence, and selling it back to the market while eliminating the human creators who'd made it possible. Sarah's article was scheduled to run on a Thursday morning, but I had one more card to play before the story broke. I wanted to confront them directly, not because I expected an apology or admission of guilt, but because I wanted to see their faces. when they realized their house of cards was about to collapse, I sent an email to Marcus requesting a meeting to discuss potential consulting opportunities for my new AI development firm. I attached a portfolio showcasing several algorithms I'd supposedly developed after leaving the company. Algorithms that were actually variations of my original work, tweaked just enough to avoid direct plagiarism claims, but obviously derived from the same mathematical foundations. His response came back within hours, enthusiastic and eager to schedule a meeting. He mentioned that my approaches showed remarkable similarity to their current AI capabilities and suggested there might be opportunities for collaboration if I was interested in licensing my innovations. To them, the audacity was breathtaking. They were so confident in their theft that they were willing to pay me to license back my own stolen work, rebranded and resold as independent development. It was like a kidnapper offering to sell you your own child after claiming they'd found them wandering in the street. We met in the same conference room where they'd fired me 3 months earlier. Marcus brought along 2 other engineers I didn't recognize, and they spent 20 minutes gushing about my portfolio, praising the elegance of my algorithms, and expressing amazement at how closely they aligned with their current development priorities. I let them talk, nodding and smiling while internally counting down the hours until Sarah's article would go live and their world would implode. Then I leaned forward and delivered the line I'd been rehearsing for weeks. You know, it's funny how similar these are to the work I did here before you replaced me with AI. Marcus's smile faltered for just a moment before snapping back into place. Well, great minds think alike, he said with forced laughter. The principles of machine learning are pretty universal. I'm sure there's bound to be some convergence in approaches. I pulled out my laptop and opened a presentation I'd prepared specifically for this moment. Side-by-side code comparisons, highlighted in colors that made the similarities impossible to ignore. Statistical analysis that proved beyond reasonable doubt that their AI was built on my algorithms, and a timeline that showed their revolutionary breakthrough had coincided suspiciously. With my termination, the room went silent, except for the hum of the air conditioning and the sound of Marcus's career prospects deflating like a punctured balloon. One of the engineers leaned forward, squinting at the screen. That's not possible, he stammered. Our AI platform generates original code. This is just coincidence. I smiled. The kind of smile that says I've been waiting months for this moment. Coincidence would be interesting, given that your AI seems to have independently rediscovered not just my algorithms, but also my specific bugs, the ones I documented in internal reports that never got fixed because you were too busy planning my replacement. Marcus's face had gone pale, enough to suggest he was contemplating career changes or possibly witness protection. I clicked to the next slide, which showed documentation from my personal files, dated months before their AI platform existed, complete with version control timestamps that any competent lawyer could verify. You want to know what's really impressive about your AI system. I continued. It managed to replicate not just my successful implementations, but also my failed experiments, the ones that didn't make it into production, the specific approaches I tried and abandoned because they didn't work. Your revolutionary artificial intelligence apparently spent time rediscovering dead ends that only existed in my private research notes. The meeting ended abruptly with mumbled excuses about needing to check with legal and promises to follow up that everyone in the room knew would never materialize. I packed up my laptop, walked out of that building for what I knew would be the last time, and felt lighter than I had in months. They could fire me. They could steal my work. They could even sell it as innovation. But they couldn't erase the fact that every line of brilliant code their AI generated had originated in my brain, flowed through my fingers, and solved problems they never would have thought to tackle. Sarah's article went live at 6 a.m. the next morning with a headline that made my coffee taste like victory: how tech companies are stealing from developers and selling their work as artificial intelligence. The piece was thorough, devastating, and backed by evidence that would make a forensic accountant weep with joy. She'd corroborated my findings with testimonials from other victims, expert analysis from computer science professors, and even comments from industry insiders who confirmed this was becoming a widespread practice across the tech sector. The response was immediate and nuclear. My former company's stock price dropped 12% in the first hour of trading. Social media exploded with developers sharing their own stories of suspicious AI replacements, and technology journalists began investigating similar practices at other companies. The company released a statement denying all allegations and claiming their AI platform was developed using proprietary research and development. But their denials rang hollow against the mountain of evidence Sarah had assembled. Within 48 hours, 3 major clients had suspended their contracts, pending investigation, and the California Attorney General's office announced they were reviewing potential violations of intellectual property and labor laws. But the sweetest revenge came in the form of an email that landed in my inbox 3 days after the article broke. It was from Elena Rodriguez, the CEO of a startup that specialized in ethical AI development. She'd read Sarah's piece and wanted to offer me a position as their chief technology officer, leading a team focused on building AI systems that augmented human capabilities rather than replacing them. The salary was 60% higher than what I'd been making. The equity package was generous enough to make me a significant stakeholder in the company's success, and the mission statement explicitly committed to giving proper attribution and compensation to developers whose work contributed to their AI systems. I accepted the offer immediately and spent my first week helping them develop policies that would prevent the kind of intellectual property theft I'd experienced. The irony was perfect. The company that had stolen my work to build their AI platform was hemorrhaging talent and credibility, while I was being hired to help create the ethical alternative to their fraudulent business model. 6 months later, they settled the class action lawsuit that Sarah's reporting had triggered for $47 million, distributed among the developers whose work had been appropriated without consent. My share was enough to pay off my student loans, buy a house, and fund a nonprofit organization dedicated to protecting developer rights in the age of artificial intelligence. But money wasn't the real victory. The real victory was watching their AI platform collapse under scrutiny. When investigators examined the code more closely, they discovered that removing the stolen components left their system essentially non-functional. Their revolutionary breakthrough had been nothing more than an elaborate shell game designed to disguise theft as innovation. The platform was discontinued, their development team was disbanded, and Marcus was last seen updating his LinkedIn profile with keywords like seeking new opportunities and passion for ethical technology development. They'd tried to replace me with my own stolen work, and in the end, they'd replaced themselves with nothing but legal bills and career damage. Because here's what they never understood: about artificial intelligence and human creativity. You can copy code. You can steal algorithms. You can even build systems that reproduce someone else's innovations. But you can't replicate the curiosity, drive, and problem-solving instincts that created those innovations in the first place. When you eliminate the humans, you eliminate the source of future breakthroughs, and all you're left with is an expensive machine that can only rehash the past, disguised as progress. Thanks for sticking around, you digital warriors. If this story resonated with you, hit that subscribe button, because the fight for developer rights and ethical AI is just getting started. And next week, I'm going to tell you about the company that tried to patent my open source code and learned why you should never mess with someone who knows how to read licensing agreements.